do the Be Rad For Jesus, whatever that is. I'm going to try and make it so I can find this. Yes, this is Be Rad For Jesus. I'm Brian, and I'm with Scott.
Hi.
Hi. And this is the Be Rad For Jesus podcast.
Boom.
Be rad.
Be rad.
Excellent. Metal. All right, no, but we're talking hip hop. So
Sorry.
yeah.
It sounds like you're cursing when you say it like that. You sound like Dr. Roxo.
Yes, I feel like that.
The kid's friendly clown that does drugs. Don't do drugs, kids.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So
speaking of drugs,
the guy who trolled us on I was doing a TikTok live video a few months back. And while I was on there, there was a guy who kept talking about how pastors should, this is weird. This is actually going to tie back into our other topic, sort of.
Nice.
But the guy was talking about how pastors should operate, and he did way too many drugs, I think, while reading scripture on his own, and came up with the qualifier for pastors is what Jesus says to the rich young man. And so if you want to be a pastor, if you're really going to be a biblical pastor, right, then you have to sell everything you own and give it to the poor. And I was like, that's not what Jesus said. That's not ever what Jesus taught, like, consistently. And that's not what the early church did. No one else in the Bible thinks that that's what that's supposed to be.
Right.
And, or in church history, like, that was never the deal. He didn't care about logic. He just wanted to be angry and yell at me. And then, like, completely hypocritically did not actually do any of the things he was saying that I had to do. But then he also got out of it because he said he's not a pastor, so it doesn't matter. But he was planning on starting a homeless something or other. And I was like, okay, because he was basically like, either you have to do that or your church building has to be just open 24/7 for homeless people to come in and out as they please. And I was like, that's a good way to ruin a building, because you have to have, like, the reason somebody's homeless, there's lots of issues that don't just fix themselves by providing a place for them to exist.
No, I thought about that
there's
all
a
the
lot
time
more,
because,
well, California is all about homelessness right now.
Well, but this is like, just like a real quick segue, because I've struggled with this before, but I mean, it's clear that, like, Jesus basically says, give to anybody who asks, right? If they take your shirt, give him, or take your tunic, give him your shirt. Like, there's stuff that's like immediate in front of you, a need. Someone is asking you for something. Yep. Suck it up. Yeah. Make the choice that, they don't get to decide whether or not you're going to be generous, like, based on their lifestyle or anything. It's just like, nope, my obligation is, this could be, God could count this as me doing it to him. So I will do it. And so, but particularly in my state, in California, I didn't know this, and this is like, I'm still researching this, but it's kind of, there's a real weird underbelly of, like, homelessness from the way that we handle it. We kind of, as a state, throw money at it. And I'm not trying to make a political statement. It's just, I thought, like, wow, we need more funding. Like, it would be better to have more, homeless shelters and stuff. And what I basically found out is that, like, we don't hold anyone to account for anything when we give them aid. So we give them shelter, and then they can do whatever they want with that shelter. And actually, sadly, a bunch of, like, people end up overdosing because now they have a safe place to do drugs. Yep. And there's no one around. So when they're in their, like, open drug scene, which is what we call homeless encampments, they have people there that are like, oh gosh, we should call the cops, or maybe somebody has Narcan and they can stop the overdose. Like, that actually and so, while it is a cesspool of living, there is some compassion, right? So anyway, so all this to say, it got me thinking about, is it compassionate? What is compassionate to someone? Because immediately in front of you, someone asks you for something, you give it. Like, that's a pretty easy rule. Like, all right, yeah, I've got $5 that I really don't need as much as this person, and who cares what they do with it? That's not my choice, But should I take someone home and give them, welcome them into my house and give them everything that I have? I don't know. I don't think that that's commanded, and I don't think it's wise. I used to feel like, man, maybe I should, like, I've got a garage you could sleep in, but it's like, it just becomes, people are homeless for so many reasons. Nobody's homeless for the same reason. And sometimes it's drug abuse, sometimes it's addiction, sometimes it's, mental illness that's beyond, the average mortal to like care for. And, cause even my uncle-in-law went on a rescue mission thing, and some of the people that used to be homeless were like, stopped doing rescue mission stuff because they're like, it's just enabling. And it's just really, all that to say, I'm not saying homeless people should be homeless. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that homeless people deserve to be homeless, or that they don't deserve help, or that there aren't things we should do. What I'm saying is that oftentimes what we do in the name of compassion, like your troll, and we do things in the name of compassion often that become totally off center from what they do, what they are intended to do, and they actually cause harm, and we're unwilling to look at it because we're doing it in the name of compassion, So that's a really deep issue. I've been thinking about that a lot. I've been trying to make myself more aware of what actually helps, because I think going to a soup kitchen obviously helps. That person is eating a meal, that they wouldn't have gotten without you being there. So I think that matters, but it's harder on like a bigger scale when you start looking at like homeless people should be able to do whatever they want and go wherever they want. And it's like, okay, I don't feel like I'm allowed to do that, and it's not just because I have the privilege of like having my own shelter. It's like, I don't get to walk into your house and take your stuff.
Right. No, and that was, that's such a weird, big thing. I was noticing when we were on vacation recently and hanging out in Southern California, that the ads, there's a bunch of political ads. And what was ironic is the two homeless bills that are sponsored right now have, I don't know what the details are or what the two different approaches really are. It just struck me as interesting that the sponsors of both bills, and they're competing, there are ads running like, vote for 136, not 137. And, but like, or vote for 137, not 136. Both sides of that are sponsored by FanDuel and, what's the other betting one? Like DraftKings. And there's like one or two online sports betting apps that are sponsoring each side. And because the way, if it gets written this way, then FanDuel is going to get all the money, and then this kind of thing is going to happen. And that, like, I don't understand like how that works, but either way, they're both looking at funneling money into these apps. And then like, it's a weird, like fundraising thing for them, like allow us to do, cause it's like one of those weird combo things. It's like, it seems like it's a bit of allow us to, legalize this form of betting in a more overt way. And like, allow us to do these things. And then if you do that, our company, is going to get billions of dollars, and then we're going to put a bunch of that back into homeless. And it's like, no, the majority of this thing ends up funding this, like, but that's this how is just going to funnel money at a corporation.
And that's where, I mean, I honestly don't really care what politics you hold on, as a person, because, there are certain things I think are evil, but I don't think a political party is necessarily good or evil. But this is where, like, again, I just, my friend put it perfectly. He moved out here like 6 years ago from the South, and he was like excited to vote on things that were on the ballot. Like, wow, look at all the things California's doing, and whatever it was, I don't remember. And then he voted for all these things, all these tax increases, like, to do these things. And he was just like, I've lived here for 6 years. And he's like, everything has either gotten demonstrably worse or it's the same. And so I'm not saying that to pick on my state. Like, I want to pray for my state. I want to, like, I want Gavin Newsom to be blessed and to be wise and to be, I want the Holy Spirit to speak to him. I don't want to curse him, but, but it just goes to show that's the wrong kingdom to put your faith in. Right?
Yeah.
God said, like, God says everything, essentially, like, everything we do in secret. Like Jesus talked about this when you pray, when you give, when you fast. Do it all in secret. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing, because your Father sees it. And, you know, he doesn't directly promise this in those verses, but then he does say, like, you know, if you ask for things, your heavenly Father's good. And so there is this aspect of like Christians, myself included, get very frustrated with social programs because you start to put the social program, you're like, yes, Jesus would be pro this. And then you put that up, but then it involves people who don't have the same motives, don't have the same goals, don't have the same vision. And then, you know, tax money or whatever else comes in, and then it doesn't always go and have the effect because there's not necessarily the accountability. And so it's like, ultimately, I know that every lost soul, you know, needs to know their God because that's what they were made to. That is what will energize them in the sense of like, this will actually last, you know, it's not just a high. It's not, you know, it will be with you in suffering and with you in good, you know, this is what you were made to do. You're made to, and so it's just hard because logistically you run into those deep questions of like, how do I treat someone? How do I treat a group of human beings, you know, the best way, the most kingdom way.
Yeah. And I know, like, I don't know which, if any of those bills in California would actually have any, you know, tangible impact in a positive way. The one thing I do know is the overall attitude towards homelessness that I've experienced is just like this completely dehumanizing conversation about it. And even, you know, recently I was talking with some, you know, local pastors about it. And, you know, the conversation, the difference between like, you know, Douglas County, where I live, where it's kind of, you know, a fairly nice community and we don't have a lot of visible homelessness around. And then there's Carson City, which has a whole lot of homeless people around, and Reno has tons. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy because we do get very cold in the winter and bad weather. And so it's a hard place to be homeless. Same with Tahoe. I noticed there's a huge increase in people, homeless people in Tahoe. And it's weird because it's like, on the one hand, I want to be able to be compassionate. And I know that the one thing we can't do is dehumanize people. Right. And that's something that I've heard people do. Thankfully, none of the pastors were doing that. Although one of them had been connected to law enforcement before and was talking about how, like, you know, the easiest, you know, like the thing that easily happens a lot. And like San Francisco just got in trouble for this is you send them back to whatever their ID says. If they have any form of ID, if that says a different town, that's where they go because we gave them a ride home. And that was the policy, and acknowledging like, that's not great. Yeah. Like that doesn't do good, necessarily solve anything. Right. But it takes the burden off of us. And I know, you know, I've spoken with officers who were like, here's what my, you know, policy, here's what my directive tells me I'm supposed to do, but it is so inhumane. Yeah. And so I cannot just harass people, boot them, arrest them, do that. You know, and so it's like, I look for, hey, can I give you a ride to the homeless shelter instead? And so that, you know, I know somebody who has done that several times and they're like, I go way out of my way and everything else. But if my job is to protect and serve, how am I protecting and serving this person? Right. And how am I treating them as a human? And they're like, and you know, it causes me some grief among my fellow officers, among that. And I've known several police officers in different states. I can think of examples of this in three different states, specifically off the top of my head. I'm not going to name drop anybody. I don't want to put anybody under the bus, but I can think of people in all three states in which I've lived recently. And in every one of those places, I know at least one cop who has gone through this, dealt with this, and landed on choosing compassion is within the bounds of what I'm allowed to do with myself, but it does kind of go against the general tenor of what we're supposed to do. But that general attitude is to dehumanize them. And the way people talk about it is as if there's some, you know, it's like we're talking about rats that are infesting a place rather than talking about human beings who, like, yeah, there's crime, there's drug use, there's, I know people who have had their homes broken into or, their property trespassed by homeless people, and not just, not just like somebody on the front lawn or, on the sidewalk. I mean, like people breaking into the backyard and trying to get into the shed and, like trying to get into the house, like, stuff like that, where it's like, okay, that can't be happening.
Yeah.
But also, how do we help people if they're interested in not being criminally, imprisoned?
Well, that's where
how do we help them?
And this I hope is not political anymore, but there was a candidate who is an author who was running for governor in like our little runoff election that we had, and he didn't get even nominated, I don't think, but he has mentioned reconnecting with his faith several times, and he was a very like super far left, like like environmental like soldier, and through that environmentalism, he kind of ended up coming back to like a place of centrism, because he went to like Venezuela, to help the rebels. And he's like, there were all these kids, and like all the kids I talked to were like, can you get me into the city? Like, I just want to go get a job. Like, and like they were supposed to be overthrowing the system. And, so he was looking at things through a different lens. He was actually, his platform for homelessness was the only sensible thing I've ever heard on the topic. And so this is, we're talking about homelessness not a lot. That's fine with me, but we don't have to stay on this topic. But he just basically said, everybody holds up, Portugal and Amsterdam as like what to do about drugs. And he was like, so I went there. I was invited there by like to Portugal by like their drug czar, whatever his title is. Yeah. And it was so fascinating, because what he said was, what happens if somebody, so this guy, Michael Schellenberger, asked the guy in Portugal, he said, what happens if I just shot up heroin right here in this park? He goes, you'd be immediately arrested. He's like, what? He's like, yeah, like, and he's like, I thought all your drugs were legal. He's like, they are. You just keep, like, doing them in a public space is super harmful. Like, can you imagine kids watching you do that? And like, what if you don't clean up your needles? Like, and it was just like, oh, well, what happens? You'd get arrested. You'd go to a tribunal where your family would be invited to be there with you. They'd have to watch you go through this process, and you would be given two options. You can go to prison, or you can clean up. And if you say, I don't want to get clean, then you go to prison and you get clean. And if you say, I want to get clean, then you go to rehab, and you're given everything you could possibly need: shelter, food, and a job. And they're all contingent on staying clean.
Right.
And so he was like, what we're missing in the name of compassion is the stick, right? We have the carrot. We literally say, in California anyway, there is so much help if you want it. But if I were addicted to heroin, I don't think I'd be capable of choosing that. Right. And that's not my opinion. I think that's a medical fact, So that's where we run into the issue. Like you said, you can't have people breaking into stuff, because that's not lawful for any group of people to do, because there has to be some safety in the society to function. There has to be some like, okay, I have a reasonable security in my home. It's not just like bands of thieves just rolling through, So there is that tension where it's like, well, you're a victim of some circumstance to be there, and that's fine. No judgment, but there has to be a way out that is actually like, hey, we're expecting you society is expecting you to rise above this, and that's the standard we're holding you to. Because if we just say, hey, if you feel like cleaning up, we'll give you Suboxone and everything you need to not do this, but it's like, if you're capable of choosing it,
and I think that's the key is because this podcast, the perspective here of looking at things in the name of Jesus, how can we be radically different and radically awesome? That would be both of those things. It would be radically different to have that paradigm shift of what is tangible help. And I'm sorry, but just outright enablement is never helpful. Like
it's not helpful to them.
That's like counseling and therapy 101. Like enabling is the opposite. That's codependency. That's why Al-Anon exists, because you need AA type, you need the accountability for the addict, and you need the non-enablement for the surrounding family and friends. And so you've got to get rid of both of those. And so, something like that where, no, you're actually going to go, but then that brings in an entirely different concept, a radically different concept in what happens to somebody in prison. Because here, if you go to jail for drugs, you just go to jail. You go to jail with everybody else. There's little to no help with rehab. There's, like most people come out worse and more broken. There's so much gangs and drugs and everything else. You're going to get more
skills. They're just not life skills. They're gang skills.
I have a friend who went to, he was involved in drugs and everything else, but not heroin. And he was involved in lots of things, committed a felony, and went to prison. And he said he spent, I don't know if he did 2 different sentences in prison or if he just had 2 different, he got transferred at one point, but he had 2 different cellmates. And he said, in prison, my first cellmate introduced me to heroin. And that's how I got hooked on heroin. And my second cellmate introduced me to Jesus. And that's how I got clean and got hooked on Jesus.
Wow.
And now he serves in the church, and he's an awesome guy. He's still got issues, because we all do, but, so he's not perfect, but he's following Jesus with everything he's got. And it has radically transformed his life. And that kind of commitment to radical transformation would mean not only do we need law reform, but then we need actual, like you said, like we would need money put into good rehab programs that actually work, which we tend not to have.
Because they're all, but it goes back to that same problem. It's always based on like, well, the compassionate thing to do is just to give you stuff so that you don't die right now. And you're like, yes, that is compassionate.
And then what next?
Yeah, but then don't hold them to any standard of personal behavior, which is and give them no help to change their behavior. So that's not compassion.
Right.
That's anti-compassion.
And there are places within our system where that's possible. And I think if we could lean more into those, because you do hear of judges, for instance, like my friend who just recently passed away. One of her biggest things that she was, that she counted as a great success and legacy was her work in the drug court here in Douglas County, where she had lots of people who attended her funeral who had been through her drug court.
Wow.
And she held that kind of thing. It felt more like the process from Amsterdam.
Yeah. Like what's sensible to do?
Like, what are you going, if you keep doing this, you're going to go to prison.
Right.
Like you will go to jail.
And you'll get clean there.
And you will not get out. But if you stay clean, if you get a job, if you can come back and show me that you're attending NA, that you're, holding a job, or at least attempting to, all these things, then we will keep you out. But you're due back here to report on your progress on these things, and we're going to talk about it.
And if you don't show up, you're going to prison. And if you don't do these things, you're going to prison.
And there will be a warrant out for you. But those kinds of responses, like, a lot of those people got clean, and a lot of those people who went in where they are the defendant in, state or county versus or whatever, however that works, like they're in criminal drug court, and she's giving them an out that really causes them and gives them legitimate consequences if they don't do it, but that of their choosing. It's up to you, but here are all the things we will offer you to help you move along this process. And a lot of people chose life. A lot of people chose radical difference of, I'm not just going to go to jail and get worse there. I'm going to go here and move forward. And that's amazing. Yeah.
Thank God for that.
Coming back to, so I think it's possible, but the emphasis has to be recognizing what true compassion and true, a different perspective on life that, again, even for those, and I think it's it would definitely be sourced for those of us who know Christ. It would be sourced in a kingdom perspective,
Right.
but it applies to anybody who just looks at it and goes, oh, basic human compassion and doing what's better for our society and for these people as people is to have tangible steps that push that forward, that give real consequences and real solutions. And we don't want to do that. We'd rather, like San Francisco. Did you hear about that? Because they were literally giving out free bus tickets to anyone who wants to go to Eureka. One-way bus tickets, and they were just loading homeless people on Greyhounds.
Not my problem.
Exactly. And Eureka's like, excuse me, no, you can't do this.
And then Eureka's like, we'll give you free tickets to Seattle.
Because they're like, we want to help these people, but this is not the way to do it. But all of that, we got onto that from this idea that while I was being trolled by this guy who ended up like 1-starring our church on Google and everything and just being a punk about things, the thing that he quoted me in that he was upset about is at the end when I was like banning him from my video, I said, hey, I don't even know what to say, because his responses were incoherent. He was, very like one trick, one line item kind of thing, and would not deviate from that no matter what other conversation was happening. He's just spamming the chat with the same nonsense. And I'm like, I already addressed this. He's like, won't even answer my questions because he's a punk. He's afraid. He's a coward. And I'm like, I already talked about it's fine. We're moving on. If you can't stop, you're out. And after, half an hour of that, it was like, okay, done. And I gave him a shot. And as I was closing out, I was like, I don't even know what to say anymore. Cause like, this doesn't even make sense. Like, I guess don't do drugs, kids, And I booted him, and he quoted that in the thing. He's like, pastor says things like, don't do drugs, kids. You wouldn't want to go here. And Mandy read the thing, and she's like, I feel like I do want a pastor to say things like that to people. So.
Should this be a 5-star review?
I think what probably happened though, because one of the trolling reviews that he gave us was connected to his personal profile.
Oh.
And so when I clicked on it, it did show me that not only does he live halfway across the country and has nothing to do with reviewing my church for anything, but also his personal business is selling weed gummies. so like, no wonder he was offended that I said don't do drugs.
Yeah, he's like, that's my livelihood.
Yeah. So that oh well.
So did you buy any or?
Yeah, totally.
That's what we're all waiting to hear.
I was absolutely into that. No, so I don't know if we got time for it at this point, but I did want to bring up, because it ties back to so where I said the homeless thing might actually tie back into all of this. Policies on expecting the world to look Christian is always going to be a losing battle. Like, lost people are going to be lost. Right. And so there are ways that we can make appeals to compassion and that kind of thing. But like, as Christians, we can't be the ones championing the dehumanizing or abuse of others.
Right.
And so I overheard this conversation on a podcast called Southside Rabbi. It's super good. Highly recommend, by a couple of Christian hip hop artists. And they were talking about industry stuff and how like the record deals in the Christian industry don't look any different from the ones in the mainstream industry. And, there have been a lot of movies and things coming out where those kinds of rip-off deals have been highlighted. I think there was some stuff in the Johnny Cash movie. There was some stuff in the Elvis movie that, talked about that. And, Britney Spears, like just went through all this stuff. And part of that, and all of that, her parents getting total control of her life and everything was connected to the record deal stuff. Yeah. It all came out of that same thing. Like, well, we're going to set up all this stuff. Ashley, Kate, and Mary Olsen had a bunch of crazy stuff going on with their parents because, they were putting a trust. And so it's this weird, like, we're giving way too much fame and fortune and opportunity for sin and debauchery to people that are not skilled to handle it.
Right.
But then also, there's these predatory contracts where it's like, the record company is going to make a fortune and they're going to own everything you ever wrote or created. Yeah. And then also, this artist, and the thing that these guys were saying, they were like, the Christian record labels aren't any different.
Right.
And they said the deals that they offer you, it's like you're starving and hungry, and they're like, hey, well, we'll put you on tour and you get, a certain percent of everything you make on tour. You can sell merch. You can also, we'll give you a budget for, you get to eat 5-star restaurants, every day of the week if you want, and all that kind of stuff, and like clothing and all this. And so they're like, sweet, I got all this free stuff. And they're like, but then in 5 years, when you're not pulling those kind of numbers because you blew up, but it was on you. Yeah. All this stuff. And then they took a huge chunk because you barely made any money on any of those concerts. Once you pay for all the expenses, you play a big arena, everybody pays a ton of money to go there. And in the end of it, the profit is still relatively small for what you would expect in that. And then that doesn't last forever. And so they're like, long term, the reason the record label's willing to do all that is because they know long term, the money is in, owning the master recordings and all that, and being able to use those on streaming and everything, and the publishing.
Well, see,
so that was all predatory stuff that they were talking about, which then calls into question, like, is it even worthwhile? Like, people like Lecrae and now like KB and this end up signing to secular labels once they get big enough to move beyond like, white kid youth group crowd. And then like, they weren't necessarily hitting this on this podcast, but in the same mindset of what we're doing, if the kingdom is going to be radically different, how we operate in this world, a Christian label should have completely different ethics and principles to how they're writing contracts, to how they're setting these things up. They should not try to copy the world and just do like, oh, well, this is, how secular record labels make money. And then at the same time, promote the idea that like, hey, that guy went mainstream, therefore he sold out and he abandoned his faith and everything. Right. And then we turn around the other way and we look at, Eminem rapping a gospel track, or Kanye with his big thing. And we want to then pigeonhole that into a Christian thing and keep it out of the mainstream, or we want to claim that person as like our guy in this. And all of these things, like the whole concept is wrong. It's all more like American Idol celebrity idolatry than it is about kingdom ethics. So anyway, sorry, you were going to say something about all that. And I know you have experience in the record industry. Well,
I remember we had to take a class on music business when I was in the conservatory I went to. And, it was, the 5 evilities of, that was the word that he used, of record contracts. I don't remember them. I was just trying to look it up, but I don't know if anybody ever put that online. But like, it was essentially, like the publishing, the songwriting, there's all these ways to split things, which I don't remember all of them. But like, usually you get 50% of the song pie at minimum. Like, you usually get that. But then you usually don't get all of your publishing. So it's like, I don't know why those are different. It's weird. But like, so to play the devil's advocate for 1 second, those record companies are providing a really sought after service most times. So it's not easy to get yourself on tour unless you have a label that can get you on tour, that has an A&R guy that knows everybody, that can talk to everybody and talk to you about you to everybody. So that's a service, and it's worth a lot of money. That's fair.
Well, so what they're saying regarding that was that the label is becoming obsolete in that because they provide so little of they make it sound like that's the service they give you. Yeah. And then largely they don't, because that's on your manager and your promo person, which you usually hire externally, and they don't tell you. They say,
usually we're going to give you all loan. This. That's basically that's what I was going to say, is that like they provide a service that's valuable, but it's not worth what you pay. That's what I was going to say. So it's like a really, really, really bad loan, because they're going to basically give you, like, sometimes they'll give you cash. Sometimes they'll give you, like, you know, certain things you negotiate. Like, I worked with a girl named Hope Shorter who had the most amazing voice I've ever heard in person. and I don't think anything became of her, but she would play 3rd Street Promenade, which is like an open mall in Santa Monica, I think it is.
Yeah.
And she would just play there, and people would just come because she's her voice is angelic. It's so good. And eventually, like all these record labels were getting interested. So she just, instead of negotiating, she just put out what she wanted. So she's like, I want my own record label. Like she literally was like, I want my own record label, and I want my own, and I want this much money, and I want blah 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 blah. And Atlantic gave it to her. So she started Sweet Lemon Records, which I don't know what happened to her. I hope she's okay, but it all kind of went south. So. Sorry, I just got to touch that so it doesn't fall asleep.
Right.
But so like all that to say, you can get some good stuff from them, right? But then the way they recoup it is like you said, they're going to say, all right, we're going to take this much of the door everywhere you go. And then we're going to take this much of your record sales everywhere you go, and this much of your streams everywhere you stream, and this much of everything. And then also we own the publishing. So that's the big thing, because so it's like Taylor Swift, Madonna, and LL Cool J were like the only people that own their own publishing outright.
Right.
And Taylor Swift started that way because she was super smart.
Yeah.
LL Cool J started that way as well, I believe. And Madonna bought hers.
Right.
She literally had to make enough money to buy it so that she's like, I am the only sole controller of the publishing.
Right.
And so, it's just one of those things where once they get their hooks in you, then it's like, okay, fine. Torch your career. We literally can play these songs for the rest of eternity, and we get paid every time. So
right.
So
exactly, and that's what they were. That was one of the things they were saying. They were like, one of the guys was saying, he's like, dude, I know a guy who, he's like, he had a huge hit that everybody has heard. But it was one big hit, and he took the sour side of the deal. And didn't get any publishing, didn't get any masters, didn't get any of those rights, didn't get any of that long-term investment money at all. Right. All he got we'll put you on tour. Here's an upfront bonus. Here's, the car and the clothes and the restaurants. And he was living it up for a couple of years. And, 10 years ago had a massive hit. He's like, you know what he was doing recently? He's like, this summer he DJ'd my cousin's wedding.
Right. Jeez.
He's like, that guy DJ'd someone's wedding after he was selling out stadiums, more than a decade ago, because he needs to eat and he cannot eat off that anymore. And so, but the sad part is that according to these guys who are in the industry, among the Christian record labels, it's not common to find a better deal. They will not come out and say, hey, here's a way so you don't get screwed.
Right.
It's all this churning out of stuff. And like, even honestly, like when you hear the songwriting stories, like the story behind the song on, like, if you ever listen to like K-Love or Air One or any of those kind of things where you're hearing the artists talk about like where their song came from and what the process was. If you watch, like, they talk about going into these studios and they have these, like, these are the people who write all the best songs and they're going to help you write the song and all this. And it's like, you want to think this song came from somebody like, King David, David the shepherd on the hill with the sheep, just contemplating the word and writing praises to him. And that's where half the Psalms come from. Right. And you want to think like, man, that's where this song came from too, is just this person was sitting there in their prayer closet and they just had this inspiration of the Holy Spirit and they wrote it down as like, no. Like, I mean, not saying that there's no Holy Spirit in it, but a lot of the time it's not.
It's to make it.
It's not that. It's these people. Yeah, you're with all the hit makers, the guys who like have written the songs that are still
use a lot of water references.
Drowning. And they have their formula, they have their thing, and there's a reason why so much of it sounds similar again, and why it goes this way, and then it gets dragged back into this. Even the new artists, like their first album's super cool, and it got them attention, and then they just put it back into the same mold as everybody else.
And I wanted to say, so I was incorrect about something, but it's really like on point with this because something sparked my memory. So Taylor Swift actually is in the process of re-recording her own music. Right. Because so this is where, again, it gets to that master recording thing you were talking about. Mm-hmm. So if you listen to Taylor Swift Fearless, the first version of it on Spotify, it will be, some of that money will go to her first label, Big Machine. And so then she parted ways with them. But so what I was right about, she's 100% songwriting. So she does not share that with anybody else. She's been the songwriter on almost everything, I think. So she owns the song, but not the recording. So that's the publishing. So she then goes and has to remake everything just to say, now I have 100% of the publishing too, because I'm going to push, hey, go listen to the re-record of Fearless and the re-record of Red and the re-record of 1989, which was released in 2014. And, you know, so it's like, because I remember watching a video about this. So I think, like, because here's another random fun fact. Before I say what I was going to say, in the American Idol contract, this was the example they used while I was in school.
Yeah.
There is a clause in there that says they own rights to and to reproduce your biography.
Yes.
And then there's another clause that they use often that says in perpetuity throughout the universe.
Yes.
So if we colonize Mars, this contract is not nullified.
And that's what KB was saying in that podcast. He said, I was writing. I wrote a verse on a track. I was invited to come be on this track. And he's like, I get my verse and everything else. I'm looking at the contract. He's like, nobody ever reads those, but I learned a long time ago, read the contract. Yeah. And he's like, and that term was in there. He said, they said in perpetuity throughout the universe, they own every single aspect of this. And he said, and I walked up to, you know, the manager or the label exec, whoever was around. And he said, delete my recording. Pull my verse from the track. I will not sign off on any of this. I'm out. I want off of this completely. And they were like, whoa, what? And they took that out.
Wow.
They changed the contract because they were like, no, we really want you in this. He's like, cool. But you don't get to own this.
Make it 1 page long.
You don't get to own this. You don't get to own me.
Here's my percentage. Yeah, exactly. It needs to be 2 or 3 pages at most. So that's where I think if you wanted to radically change any industry in the name of Jesus, it's, you know, your care for the business transaction has to extend only to them, not beyond them to the profit. Right. So you can talk about the profit together. You know, that's the issue. But you can't look through them to your goal. You can't just be like, all right, well, if I kind of do this, I can see a lot of money over there. So I don't care what I do to you to shred you up so I can look through you. You know, it's like, what you have to do is say, okay, if I was a record company and let's say I'm like, you sign with me tomorrow, you will be on tour with, like, I don't know who tours that's Christian. I don't listen to Christian music.
It doesn't matter.
I listen to worship music, but not Christian music. Because I don't think it's good anyway.
I don't think I don't think all the worship contracts are all that different from some of them. I'm sure.
Well, a lot of them, like I don't know if Elevation or Bethel, they just seem to publish stuff. I don't know if they have record contracts. You know, they just probably hired somebody to record their stuff.
Their own, you know? because it's Bethel Publishing. Yeah, like if you look at the text of all of that, and then worship music is a whole other thing, which is crazy.
So let's leave that aside. Anyway. So it's like, so if you wanted to just change it, you just have to basically say, my goal is to make sure I'm telling you exactly what I'm providing you. I'm telling you exactly how much it costs, and I'm telling you exactly how much benefit you can expect. Right. And here's how, okay, yes, I'm going to hold on to your publishing for this long. And and that's what it means to you. So every time you stream a song, I'm going to get this percentage. That's how I make my money back, because I'm going to give you this service. And if that's not agreeable, negotiate or don't sign. And that's it's simple as that. It's literally that simple, you know? Right.
And the fair way there, because I think we're and especially like based on what these guys were saying, and then let's turn it to a broader thing, because the majority of people are never going to have to deal with artist or label side of contract negotiations, but it applies broader. But I think where it came from originally, like you said, the service that the label provides, like you have talent, but no one will ever know who you are and no one will ever be able to hear you because the recording equipment is millions of dollars of stuff sitting in our studio. So you can't access it until you sign with us. You don't have that. Nowadays, that's not a thing.
I'm using recording equipment right now.
Right. Yeah. Like you can,
that I bought for not much money.
Right. If you spent $1,000, you could set yourself, and this is what most of especially like hip hop and everything. Like I remember watching our friend Mike Wooford get started with his stuff, and like, like his initial setup, the most expensive thing was the recording, software. And then it was like piece by piece, he's adding more and more. And they finally like built out his shed and everything. But like the stuff he was producing sounded amazing. Oh yeah. And it was like, and I remember going in and like messing around and recording something with him one time, and not for anything he was actually going to use. We were just like working on, trying to write a worship song with the youth group. But like just the stuff that he was using was not like hundreds of thousands of dollars at that point, and so it was like, it was not unattainable to be, self-producing this stuff. And then, like they said, like you're using your own lawyer, you're using your own, PR guy, you're using your own manager and all this stuff. And it's like, by the time you've done all those things, now you don't, your own agent. And so it's like, now the label is just managing all these contracts and publishing rights, and not in a way that benefits everybody. And so like, one of the guys was saying he's signed with a major label now, I think. And he said, and I will not enter any contract that's not profit share based. Right. That's not, he's like, we will share profits, and they will try to say, but we're putting in all this money to make you famous and you're not bringing anything to the table. And he's like, no, literally, I am the product. Yeah. Like I'm the thing you're trying to promote. Without me, you have nothing to record as far as this conversation goes. Yeah. So it's not, I'm not bringing anything to the table. You're putting in money to, to help this thing happen. To see this thing happen, but it doesn't happen if I'm not here. So and ultimately it's my image, my name. And like you said, with American Idol and all those kinds of things, it's my story and all of these things that you're trying to own. We can share that, but I'm not giving it away. And I think that kind of thing in general so bringing it all the way back down to a level that everybody can relate to, whether it's working or serving, volunteering on church staff, whether it's, serving in some sort of ministry capacity, whether it's just working in any kind of job, staying away from and being aware of on the, I don't want to say victim end, but like what could potentially become the victim side. So if you're the person entering into deals with somebody bigger who has power over you, engaging in conversation that, being aware of, hey, what's right and fair for everybody long term? If I'm just an employee, making sure that my employee contract and my employee setup, not being entitled and feeling like, well, I've never done this before, but you owe me the entire world before I'm going to do anything for you. Not being an entitled, stereotypical Gen Z millennial mentality. I mean, literally entering into it and going, what's fair and right? What's worth, like I remember when I first interned at a church, and the perspective of the youth pastor who hired me as an intern was, he's like, I'm giving you roughly $10 an hour. We're asking for 10 hours a week interning. We're going to pay you $100 a week. Right. He's like, and back then that was a legal wage. I know a lot of places that's, below minimum wage now, but back then it was fine. And he's like, but here's the thing. It's not that I'm saying you're only worth $10 an hour, but what we're hoping is that if we give you this $100 a week, financially in your situation, you will be able to free up yourself from that obligation to that 10 hours a week, so that you can put it into working at the church.
Right.
and serving here and growing and learning. And that because this is a short-term internship, the hope is beyond that, you would be able to apply those skills as well. So we're hoping to make it worth your while now and set you up with things that will carry forward. And it's a service and benefit to our church to be doing this and discipling you and having that. And so something like that makes sense is, the right heart was there.
Yeah.
The idea was not, we're going to pay you $10, so you better be here for 10, they weren't Nazis about all the things. They were trying to be fair in and good, beneficial for all, and recognizing like, if you're serving in a way that's happy, that you're happy with it, that's benefiting you, it's helping your family, then at the end of it, this is good for you. It's good for the kingdom. We have been a blessing to you. How can we take care of you? That's why traditionally In-N-Out has paid better wages to their workers, because they looked at it from a perspective of, what do we need to do to make this be a positive experience for the, largely kids, fast food, who work here, or who start working here. We'll pay them better than every other fast food joint. We'll offer benefits, and they do. And it's usually In-N-Out,
that's the good example
it's a good thing, but that's what it looks like to be radically different, is to not consider how do I get mine, but how do we all benefit. And that's where like even the entitlement
should we all take a day off?
Leaves,
right? Like Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Should we all, we're just not, no one's working on Sunday.
Right.
And so, you can work somewhere else, but you can't work here, because the hope is you take a day off, like you actually don't do anything, and actually have a Sabbath, which that's what we should talk about next time. Because I recently read a book that ruined my life.
All right.
So
next time we'll chat about Sabbath. So that was all the things. We didn't get to the Eminem gospel thing. We'll bring that up another time too, because that was good.
I want to, I haven't listened to it, so that I'd like to listen to it first. So
yeah,
I know the rest of the song is not safe for work, but I will.
Yeah, well, actually, I don't think it has any swearing in it, but it's DJ Khaled.
I'm pretty sure I turned it on the other day because I was like, oh, it's called gospel, and then it was like immediately I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it would be.
Maybe not. I don't know. I was looking at the lyrics and I didn't see
but I want to listen to it anyway. So
I didn't see any curse words in it at all. It doesn't have a thing, but that's
Use This Gospel.
Use This Gospel by DJ Khaled featuring Ye. I don't know how it.
Yeah, the name of the album is God Did. I
know. So that entire thing. So listen to that, and we'll talk about
Kanye
that.
And Eminem. Okay,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's featuring Kanye and Eminem.
Even though you've said that, I must have missed it every time you said it.
So it's a trip that, like, what does it look like that God is getting a hold? Because it's been, like Justin Bieber, Chance the Rapper has always, talked about how he's, or was raised Christian and has this faith. There's been a lot of other people. I mean, there was talk that like DMX, there's video of him praying in the name of Jesus, like powerful prayers before his concerts. And it's like, then he's going out, X don't give it to you. It's like, what? But what does it look like to radically give ourselves to the kingdom and still be engaged in the secular world? And then for those of us where that causes some sort of celebrity, how is it any different? And do we just get, every time somebody mentions Jesus in a positive light, should we lose our minds and get all excited? Right. Because not everybody's going to be a Tebow. And then on the other hand, like Tebow didn't live up to the hype as far as the sports icon went, but he is a freaking phenomenal dude. He started multiple amazing charities and does a lot of gospel work, and he's a pretty solid guy. And he's got, apparently even the last football team he was on, they kept him because they were like, what he brings to the locker room is worth paying him to be here.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they were like, he's never going to play, but just his presence. Because he steps in as like a pastor and missionary to these guys, and like, but was like bringing such a positive, encouraging, developmental presence to everything that it was like, man, like that's worth its weight in gold. And then ultimately it's like, no, we got to cut him though. He's not going to cut it because I think the last team he was on like the Broncos as a tight end or something, and it didn't work out.
I don't know sports ball. So
yeah, he didn't sports properly. So
he didn't
they let
sports
him go.
the ball very well.
But anyway, okay.
I am getting into Formula One racing though. So let's talk about that.
All right. So many things.
Do you think Vettel belongs with Ferrari?
Absolutely. I watched Ford versus Ferrari, and that was cool.
Dude, watch Formula One Drive to Survive with Mandy. Oh, you guys don't have Netflix? Freaking heck.
Yeah. We'll get a VPN so we can send it here. Don't do that. See, ethics in Christian. What does it look like to be different in the kingdom?
Don't steal songs. Don't download software you didn't pay for.
Napster. All right.
Lars Ulrich will come for you.
Yeah. And that
be
right there.
Be rad.
Controlling
that's what it means. Right. Be rad.
Yeah. Be radically different for Jesus. And if Jesus comes first in absolutely everything, it should change how we operate in all things. Yeah. And it will make us radically different and radically awesome in the name of Jesus.
Amen.
So, all right, dude. Well, hey, Scott, I love you. Be rad for Jesus.
You too.
All right, I'm here with David Strickland. Did I get that right? Okay, right. David Strickland is a TikTok creator, a youth pastor, and tattoo artist, and in general, amazing church sign creator. And that's been a lot of the content. But I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself. So, David, welcome to the Be Rad for Jesus podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to finally be able to have like a one-on-one conversation with you and sort of meet you through this weird internet way of saying hello. Like he said, my name's David. I don't necessarily think I would call myself a TikTok creator. I only post like once a week, unless I have stupid thoughts run through my head that I think would be hilarious. I am about to be 30 years old. So as my youth would say, I'm getting old. As the rest of the world says, I'm not quite there yet. So, I've got a beautiful wife and two beautiful kids. My son Parker is 6 and my daughter will be 2 this December. Her name is Rosie. And awesome. So that's pretty much all there is to me. I tattoo and then I tell kids about Jesus, and that's about it.
Oh, that's super cool, man. So, so you're turning 30. That's hilarious. How long have you been in youth ministry?
Let's see. In actual position, I've been at this church, the church that I'm at, which is Eureka Baptist Church, in Talladega, Alabama. I've been there for 3 years now. Before that, I have been in several different churches. My full, actual being a part of the ministry of the church, actually on staff, has probably been a total of maybe about 5 years total.
Awesome.
Before that, I was doing volunteer work, and I'd been doing that in youth ministry ever since I was probably about 18 or 19.
Nice. That's awesome, man. See, now you started off by saying, about to hit 30, feeling old in youth ministry compared to the youth, especially, but young, adult wise. I don't know if this is any encouragement, but my first paid gig as a youth pastor I got when I was 30. I turned 30 a couple months into it. And so my first set of youth leaders that I was overseeing as the youth pastor threw a 30th birthday party for me and brought me a walker. And so so I got started late. Everybody else that was my age was either embedded veteran that had been around for almost 10 years or, graduating out going I feel too old for this. So I'm looking for something else, I'm going to do something else in the church, lead one. And I was I've been working for 3 months. What do I do? So, but I was a, volunteer and intern and everything for like 10 years before that. And, I'd probably still be doing youth ministry and still sort of am, except that God called us to plant a church a couple years ago. So I stepped out of it reluctantly, to step into this. So,
that's awesome.
But dude, amazing family and youth ministry in a Baptist church, and you're a tattoo artist, and what's your handle on TikTok is Young Tattooist, the Young Tattooist.
Yep,
I think. And so we'll make sure to have that link for people that want to follow. So how is that combo of like tattoos and youth ministry? Because I mean, I don't have nearly as many as you. You got them down the fingers and everything on the hands, but I've got like the majority of a half sleeve over here. And I remember in that first youth ministry position, one of my students' moms coming up to me and being like, "Hey, okay, Pastor Brian, you got to tell my kid, how much you regret your tattoos and how you would never get another one, and how Jesus doesn't like them and everything. He needs to hear it from you because he won't listen to me." And I was like, yeah, you might have wanted to talk to me about this before you brought this up, because I don't think I'm done with these, and I don't regret them at all. And I think they're
can't
cool,
quite agree there,
but you should wait till you're 18, bro. That was my
for sure.
And she was like, "Whoa!" So. Not always the best combo, youth ministry and tattooing.
This is true. I've definitely gotten some interesting questions, and I've had my fair share of like either churches that I've worked in or churches I've volunteered with, or even just happened to show up to, like one church that I was a youth pastor at before this one. I had one of my youth parents that ended up afterwards telling me I was about this close to pulling my son from the youth group when you became the youth pastor. And I'm sitting here going, why? I'm a nice guy. Like, what? And she was like, it's solely because of the tattoos. And I was like, that's crazy. I didn't think it was like that strict. But then again, we are in Alabama and kind of the very conservative part of the Bible Belt. So it is what it is, I guess.
Judgy. Yeah.
True.
No, I have never been. Well, I've been to the South. I've been to the Midwest. I've been to the Bible Belt. But as a Christian, I've never lived. The farthest east I've made it is Tucson, Arizona, and so I've always operated on the West Coast, Southwest area, and I had the same kind of experience in Southern California, Orange County. I had people who could not process the idea that as a Christian, not even just as a pastor, but as a Christian, people could not wrap their heads around I had a pastor who would take me out to lunch and be like, "Brian, the Lord does not love those tattoos and piercings. He is not honored by that." And I'm like, "Bro, you shave your beard down and your hair is all trimmed short. And if we're going to get into that, there's one time tattoos are mentioned, and it's literally in the same paragraph as like, don't trim the sides of your beard or cut your hair short."
Exactly.
So, I don't know. Like, I got this and now it's done. What are you doing every week to keep that haircut, looking trim?
Exactly.
So, maybe it's something else. And, but anyway, so, before all of that, I would love to hear, because, the Be Rad For Jesus is more than just a fun, retro slogan that, gives us, some excuses to make, 80s looking merch, but, the whole premise of this is that following Jesus should call us to be radically different and radically awesome in this world. And so one of the biggest differences there is changing from doing whatever we do to following Jesus. And I'd love to hear a bit of your story. How did you come to know Christ? It sounds like it happened pretty young, but tell us a bit about that.
So, I'm Alabama born and raised. So like everybody else around the area, you just brought into church from a very young age. My dad has always been a pastor, a youth pastor, worship leader, everywhere that we've gone. So I was pretty much born in the church building almost, but we being raised in church, people think that it's like an automatic, you just kind of get grafted in, or you automatically have all these beliefs already that have just been basically like punched into you from that young age. And in a way it almost is like that, but you also have a moment where you do question things. Like you do start to wonder if everything that you've been taught, everything that you have learned and listened to is real, and you want to find that out for yourself. And so when I was about 5 years old, I decided to, walk the aisle and go talk with the preacher about becoming a Christian and all this. And
that's rad. It
wasn't until I was about maybe around 14, 15 years old, me and a few friends of mine had, throughout the middle school years, we had gotten into some things like witchcraft and like the dark magic and all this sort of stuff. We got pretty heavy into that, trying out some different almost like seances and different spells and all this sort of stuff. And we got into pretty much whatever drugs we could find. We got kind of roped into that at a really young age. And one day we were in this tunnel that goes underneath the streets, like the big drainage tunnel. And we were, smoking, doing a couple things, and all of a sudden I'm already like super, super pale. But I like all my color flushed out, and I was like, yeah, I got to throw up. And so I walked to the end of this tunnel, and I started just throwing up everything that I had in me at that day. And I just remembered looking up because I felt like someone was kind of grabbing my face like this, trying to turn me or whatever. And that was a weird feeling. So I look up and I just see like there's not a single cloud in the sky except this one. And this is the part that everybody hears and they're like, well, this is just psychotic. But I mean, I don't, whether it was hallucination or not, I don't know. But this is just what my experience was. And I just saw this face in this one cloud, and it looked so disappointed and it looked so hurt, and I was like, man, what does that mean? And next thing I know, I looked down and my knees just give out and I couldn't walk. My friends literally had to drag me back to his grandfather's house, or his great grandfather was actually who he was living with. So they threw me in the bathroom and kind of shut the door, and I just remember I'm laying around this toilet that is just disgusting. Hadn't been cleaned in probably a year or so. Like it was just laying in everybody's filth, in my own filth. It was terrible. And I just started basically, cussing God out like as much as I could. And I just kept screaming and yelling. And finally I had to get my mom to come pick me up. And so she came, picked me up, and we had like 13 stairs to get up to my bedroom in the house. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. And I just kind of told her I had like a stomach virus or something, because I didn't want her to know. So Mom, if you hear this, I'm sorry. But I get up the stairs and I open the door to my bedroom. My bed was like right there by the door. So I was just going to fall and land on it. And when I did, I missed and I hit the floor, and above me, I hear something else hit the floor. And I was like, man, what was that? And I looked up, and it was a Bible that my parents had bought me when I was 5, like when I had decided I wanted to become a Christian. And there was one verse that was highlighted, and I hadn't written in this thing. I hadn't touched it. So this one verse was highlighted, and it was just Matthew 11:28, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And I was like, you know what? If everything that I've grown up knowing is true, if everything that my parents have taught me, things that I've learned is true, and if this is real, let me wake up tomorrow. Let me not have a hangover. Let me not have any withdrawals. Let me not have any desire to do these things again. And so I woke up the next day and I was like perfectly fine. Like I felt probably the best I've ever felt in my life. And I had kind of forgotten about my end of the deal, because I was like, if you do that for me, God, if you prove that you're real in that way, I'll start living my life for you. I'll give my life over. And then next thing I know, I'm about a week later, and I'm like, start feeling this tug, and you're like, yeah, I messed up there. I forgot my end. So at that point, I went ahead and I was like, you know what, God, I believe all of this is true. I believe you are who you say you are. I believe you can do miracles still to this day. And so I want to trust you, and I want to give my life over and give myself over to you. And then a couple of years later, when I was about 16 or 17, we were in church, and I was up in the balcony with a couple of the other youth. We were trying to stay towards the back and all this sort of stuff. And the pastor is sitting there talking. He just stops all of a sudden. He goes, you know what? I don't want to finish the rest of my message, because I really feel like God's saying that there's someone here that's being called to ministry, and I want to be the first one to invite you down here so we can pray with you, so we can lead you, help get you into that door. And he was like, so if it's you, I don't normally do this. He was like, I don't know why I'm doing it, but if that's you, would you stand up? And I didn't even know I stood up. Like, it was that quick. Next thing I know, I'm like standing up in the balcony, and I'm like looking over, and my friends are looking at me like, oh my God. And so he calls me down there, and my youth pastor was probably one of the best human beings I've ever met in my life. And he walks with me. My dad goes with me, my mom, the pastor's down there. And then next thing I know, the whole church is just surrounding me and just covering me in prayer. And it was insane, and it was awesome. And so from that moment, I got plugged in to starting to help lead more with the youth, do more with music, and just kind of started getting mentored. At that moment, it was for a very brief time from my youth pastor, because he had to leave due to some family issues. But that was just something that we, I say we, my family at the time, that was something that we really saw as being God's kind of push for me to not only really give my life over, but also to just kind of start out in the ministry. And ever since then, it's been kind of volunteer work for the most part. Got my first job at a church where I had one youth when I started. The night when I came to guest speak to see if they wanted to have me, there was probably around like 30 youth there. And what had happened was, apparently the guy that had been leading was bringing all of these kids, and when he found out they were going to hire a youth pastor, he quit bringing them. And so I was down to one kid. And the year that I was there, within the first 6 months, I think, we ended up growing from one kid every Wednesday and Sunday to I think we had about 8 every single service, which was awesome. And I was there for about a year, and then we moved to North Carolina, and a whole bunch of stuff happened up there and everything. But now that we're down here, I've been, like I said, been at this church for 3 years, and I'm absolutely loving it. I couldn't ask for a better group of teenagers and their parents and everything. It's just, I don't know how I got lucky enough to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love it. And I love that, what cracks me up is, I had a very charismatic kind of an encounter with God that led to me going from just kind of checking things out, because I got saved when I was 21, or started going around 19, and then somewhere between 19 and 21, I really came to faith, and then I was kind of unwilling to surrender until just after my 21st birthday, and that's when I really was like, all right, well, I'm literally the walking dead without you, so I need this, I need you. And many, significantly spiritual experiences that led me to that. But I was in a church that didn't teach that at all. So it had nothing to do with falling prey to the, crazy charismatic moments in the church. And it was more like everybody was weirded out when I would share those parts of my testimony, and I could hear, even some hesitancy, and you're like, I don't know. I mean, like, this is kind of weird, but here's the thing. And it's so crazy to me how like so many, not every, and even just like on this podcast, like not every interview has had, something really significantly charismatic when people come to faith, but a lot of them have. And a lot of people I've talked to, like there's something more, like there's a real encounter with the living God that they can point to. And yet there's still in general so much like, like I don't want to sound weird, but let me tell you, like here's how it happened. And it's just crazy to me how like so many of us truly do experience something like that, but then also it's weird to talk about it, or, and whether that's because nobody else talks about it, or it's like, I don't want to sound too crazy compared to the world or whatever, but I love hearing that, because those are those things too, that like when you've had that kind of encounter, it's like literally life changing. And when you meet the living God, that's something that you don't just go like, well, I don't know, maybe somebody could talk me out of this. It's like, hold on, this is legit. Like I have actually, really encountered something beyond me that doesn't make sense. And it makes absolute sense if I understand the Bible as to be what it says and to accurately represent what it's claiming to. And if Jesus is who he says he is, and the Holy Spirit works like the Bible says he does, and our Father really is the creator, and the one who holds it all together, then all that, absolutely, like it's like a given, like, well, sure, of course. So man, I love all that. And it sounds like maybe in part of that, part of hearing that that whole conversion path, it may be that we've already heard kind of the raddest moment you've had with God. But sometimes in our lives, those aren't the only times that God shows up, is in those. And so is there anything else beyond what you've already shared with us that stands out as like, man, this was something that was so either or both in that category of like radically different or just awesome, like something that God did. It was like so clearly God, and it was so awesome to witness or be part of in the church or out of the church. I don't know, but any other significant, big, awesome Jesus moments come to mind that you want to share with us?
I mean, realistically, like, one thing that I think everybody would love to say is there's been so many, there's been like hundreds. And, while there have been what some of us would consider like, I guess, big things in the grand scheme of things, I look at them and I'm like, you know what, that is great and everything. And I'm super excited that happened and that I was able to be a part of that. But there are much bigger victories to be won. There's bigger things that God is doing, God has done. One of the big things for me and my family is the fact that, and not a lot of people know this about me, but I actually got caught cheating on my wife.
Wow.
Not in a physical sense. It was all over the phone and everything like that. But it was a very low point in my life, and I had just stooped to a level where I wasn't myself. I wasn't who God was trying to transform me into being. But I had just backed away from that, and I had gotten kind of what a lot of people are going through now with their whole deconstruction thing and all this about church hurt and everything. I had felt that, and I personally had been tired of not doing what I wanted to do, and so I gave in, and I made a huge mistake when I did. But to see the after effects of that, like being found out, and my wife literally dragging me to my parents' house and having me confess this in front of my parents, and having us just have this knockdown drag out of, we're going to lay this all out on the table. We're going to get real with it. We're going to get vulnerable. At that moment, I was like, you know what, God, if there's anything that I have that is in the way of a relationship with you, do what you did now and expose it and get it out of the way, because I don't want my relationship with my wife to fail. I don't want my relationship with you to fail. So just take any of these obstacles and move them out of the way. And so the biggest thing was seeing my wife going from a state of just anger and, I don't want to say necessarily hatred for me, but just this bitterness, and seeing her now, years later, in a place where, we were able to have another kid. We were able to kind of reconcile all those things, and she's able to talk to me again and trust me again. And it was all because it was nothing that I was doing. It wasn't the fact that I was like, hey, I promise I'm okay. Like, everything's good. It was literally God changing my life and my heart, and also, changing hers and helping her kind of come to terms with the things that she did, and be able to forgive me. That was the biggest part, was her just forgiving me for doing those things. So seeing God move in ways like that is always been insanely rad to me.
Wow. Yeah, dude, that's amazing. And yes, absolutely. Well, one, thank you for sharing that. That's, I think hearing more of those things, makes it okay to, to be human and to fail and experience grace. If I've never experienced grace, how can I impart that to somebody else? If I've never,
exactly,
if I pretend like I've never needed God's grace, how can I really relate, to others who I'm telling them, like, man, the grace of God is sufficient for you. I mean, I don't need it myself, but I've heard, like, compared to, I've walked that out, and it is radically different from how the world operates. And to have that, that experience, of, not that you want to jump into something like an emotional affair to land in that place.
Exactly.
But we all mess up. We all sin, and to find grace calling us to repentance, and to see how God uses the people around us, to impart his grace to us, is absolutely incredible. And something that is, makes absolute nonsense to the people around. The message of the cross and the outworkings of the cross, like Paul says in 1 Corinthians, it's just absolute foolishness to those who are, stumbling through this world. But to those of us who are being saved, it's the power of God. And, man, I love it. That's amazing. What a testimony of God's goodness. I love it. I love hearing stuff like that, because God is so good, and won't he show up and do things that, again, in every way, not just in flashy, miraculous kind of things, but in the miracle of a transformed heart, and the miracle of grace, and just the insanity of grace, is such a huge story. And like you mentioned, in a world full of deconstruction and, people walking away, and all this church hurt, especially, to encounter things like that, where there's, honesty, confession, openness, repentance, and grace and restoration, is just something that's, I think, unknown in this world, outside of Christ, because we won't accept things like that. We don't do things like that. And man, even a lot of the things going on with the church, a lot of the scandals and stuff, you don't see people go all the way through that. You don't see people truly come to confession and repentance, and you don't see real restoration. You see cheap grace that's kind of like, I don't know, I think he said he's sorry, so whatevs. Like,
slap on the wrist, basically.
Yeah. So, man, so I want to ask a little bit about, if you don't mind chatting with me about it, tell me about tattooing and being a pastor, and how does that, where does Jesus come into the tattooing stuff? And, do you have, are all your tattoos like, sick Bible stories, or I'm guessing no, but how's that work?
So, not every one of my tattoos is a Christian-based tattoo. So, I've got several. Like, I've got, I think at this point, I've got 5 TikTok creators tattooed on my knees and on my thigh and everything.
Really?
I've got like Mr. Hamilton, Angry Reactions, Call Me Chris, Youth Pastor Ryan, and then I just recently did Nathan Morris Music, and I've even got Youth Pastor Ryan's mom on my leg, just as a sorry for tattooing her son's face. I figured I would tattoo her on me, but I don't.
That's amazing.
I've got like some ridiculous tattoos, some really stupid tattoos, and then I've got tattoos that do sort of mean something to me, and I do have a few like Jesus pieces, basically, if you want to call them that, things like that. But really, the tattoo industry, there's more people than you would think that are Christians and tattoo artists. So like, I'm not like this rare breed. There are a lot of us out there, but in the industry, especially like small towns and stuff, unless you are able to open your own shop and have it be something that is like a Christian based thing, you're more than likely not going to be working in a Christian environment, or you're not going to be working in a place where everyone accepts it or everyone believes the same thing that you do. And to me, that's a part of living life. That's actually a really cool place to be, because you have a chance to share your story with people that are coming in. You meet some people on their worst days. I tattooed a girl, I think it was 2 or 3 days after she had attempted to commit suicide.
Wow.
She had just come in, and it was like a spur of the moment thing. I just so happened to be free that day to take walk-ins. And I was like, yeah, sure, we can knock this out. And she just wanted this tiny little, I think it was like the word faith and a cross or something like that. We were, kind of chatting, and I was like, so what exactly does this mean to you? Like, your first one, what's the significance of it?
Yeah.
And she kind of got pretty shy and was just very timid to tell me the story. And I was like, look, I've been there throughout my life. I've attempted 3 different times. Obviously I didn't succeed, so I'm still here for some reason. So you can have moments like that where you can relate to people, and then you can also be able to tell them what brought you out of it, or who brought you out of it. More specifically, you can tell them about the love of Jesus. You can tell them about the grace. If they haven't already encountered it, if they haven't already seen that for themselves. Yeah. And to me, that's like one of the biggest areas in life that people don't necessarily think about when they look at tattooing. They look at people like me that are tattoo artists. They're like, there's no way you can spread the gospel doing that kind of stuff. There's no, my granddad's one of the worst about it. But you do get a chance to. You get a chance to meet people not only when they're vulnerable, but you get to meet people that are absolutely fully against anything that Christianity is or anything that the Bible says. And you have opportunities to have conversations, to ask them why they stand against it, what makes them not believe. And you get a chance to tell them what makes you believe, what makes you understand, and how you know that these things are real, and how you have come to terms with that, and you kind of get to go in with your own story. And so it's, to me, having those two worlds collide is, while some people do give me kind of that raised eyebrow, like, you're a what? I'm like, yeah, I know it's weird. I know I don't get it either, but I'm here. I've been tattooing out of the house ever since I was like 16 years old. I had buddy of mine that was like, "Hey man, you ever use a tattoo machine?" I was like, "Nah, man." He was like, "Well, you're gonna," and just kind of threw it in my hand, and he did a little stick anchor on my thigh, and I did the same thing on his forearm here, and it's completely trash, but it's like he loves it, and I love the thought behind it. You know, we were best friends back then, and ever since then, man, like he gave me that machine, and I just started like working on either my legs or on other friends that were willing to be guinea pigs. And then finally, the guy that had been doing all my work, I finally convinced him to let me start an apprenticeship with him back in 2017, I think. And been working at his shop with him ever since. I kind of got thrown into it really early because one of our other artists got in a motorcycle accident and degloved his entire heel, almost lost his entire foot. So the owner of our shop, Matt, was like, "Hey man, I need you to step up. So next person that comes in wants something simple. You got it." And I was like, "Oh, they're going to cry, but all right." But it's been interesting. I love it. Every single moment, every single interaction, it's just, to me, I haven't had any other moments in, like, whether it's like mission trips or anything like that I think have helped people understand that Christianity is not something where we're all perfect, not something where we're all like this shiny, wear your suit and tie, follow the same rules as everybody else. You know, it's not always a clean cut thing. Like, you can find Christians doing things in what other, you know, legalistic or overly religious people call like dark areas. You know, you can find Christians there. You can find Christians that are just hanging out, willing to be just open humans, and I think that's probably one of the coolest aspects of it, is just being able to show people Christians aren't here to judge you. Like, we're not here to hate on you. We're not here to bash you. We're not here to do anything like that. We're just here to love you. We're here to, you know, help you along the way. We're just one beggar helping another beggar find bread. You know, that's all we're here to do.
Yeah, man. I love it. And dude, 100% agree that it's such a cool opportunity to share the gospel in a place where, I mean, you know, not everybody is going to come to a church to hear it. And nowhere in scripture do you really catch that that's the way to share the gospel, is get people to church. That's not even a biblical, you know, a concept of the early church. When it started, it was go tell them, go make disciples of every nation. You got to go to them to tell them about it. And so that's cool. I had a pastor friend that I remember him talking about how he was working on a sleeve, and he was like, "Well, I think I'm going to have to start on another sleeve." And he got both legs done because he was just like, he would use it. You know, he's sitting there, he's like, you know, I got like 30 hours of ink sitting around talking about Jesus with my, you know, captive audience. That my tattoo artist has got to sit here and just keep working, like I just keep talking about Jesus and life, and you know, a pretty incredible you know, opportunity on that end too, as the client, to, you know, just like, hey man, I'm gonna rep, and you know, on a like, not in an abrasive way, but in a cool, like, hey, we're chill, we're both into this, I love your art, I love what you're doing, I want, you know, I'm paying you good money to do this, I want to tell you about the most important thing to me though. And so yeah, that was pretty cool perspective on it, you know, to hear about all that. So I worked in a tattoo shop for a while, but I've never done tattoos. I was a piercer. I just stabbed people. That's
how I started out too.
And so I'm down to just the plugs, but I've still got little scars around, you know, like I had tongue and a bunch of stuff in my lips and all over my ears and all of that. But
I don't have enough earlobes to do that.
I saw all sorts of craziness go in there, but I got to know. So what's having been around tattoos quite a bit, what's your favorite tattoo that you've got? I'm wondering, because you have a bunch. So do you have one that's your favorite, or
favorite
for whatever
one?
Reason?
Oh, I've got some that I talk about more than others. Not because they're my favorites, but because they're just weird and interesting. And the stories behind them are kind of hilarious. I would have to say probably my favorite is the one that's on my ribs right here. I had an uncle who passed away last year. He's always been a pastor as long as I've known him. And he was always one of those that he was a hilarious guy, but he was always very, if the Lord wants to take me right now, let him go on and take me. I'm ready, but then when he was fighting everything that he was fighting with his health, and he was basically bedridden for a while, he was just, you saw that kind of broken side of him. You saw the side that was the human side that came out, and he was just, my aunt went into the room one day, and he didn't know she was there, and he was just sitting there praying, and he was like, Lord, sweeten my spirit and let me be willing to enter your presence. And he ended with just saying, what a blessed man I am. So I've got that like rocking on the side of my ribs here. Sorry for the blinding light, but
that's awesome.
So I think that's probably my, I know it's my most meaningful, but I think that's probably at the moment, that's probably my favorite tattoo that I've got as well. So
man, super cool. Have you ever gotten a tattoo that you ended up getting covered up?
I've got a couple, and they're not covered up because they're like, I mean, they were bad tattoos, but one of them was like, I've got the Alabama A on my foot, and I had it covered up with just like this big black triangle shape looking thing. Right. And then I had a game of Hangman right here on my thigh that had like P blank blank P, and it stood for poop. Yeah. but I attempted my very first cover up on that one, and you can obviously tell that I was not a very good cover up artist at the time, because you can still see the old tattoo straight through it. And it's but we're in the process right now of, on this arm, we're going through and doing blackout on all this like background filler that's all the way through here. And we're just kind of blacking out the background and leaving all the pieces that were there that we had put together. Yeah. So,
just out of curiosity, why instead of just the little filler pieces, why put all the black in?
Well, for one, we started doing the little filler, like we did the traditional stars and dots and everything. And then if you can see like the blue swirls, we had added blue swirls through all of it, because I had some weird idea when I was like 21 or whatever. And I was like, yeah, we can do these blue swirls and we'll come back with all this other stuff. And we never did. And just over the years, the more I've looked at the blue swirls, I'm like, those are really, really stupid looking. But once you do the blackout and the black heels, you can go over it with white or like gray or red even. And you can do cool designs on top of that. So I figured, instead of blacking out my entire, arm or whatever, which may get done later, I don't know. But instead of blacking everything out just completely solid, just do the background and throw in some little filler that way.
Who's the dude from, I think it's the bass player in Rage Against the Machine, has like super blacked out, like giant, like almost reverse tribal designs where it's like solid black with like a little white cut out. It goes into big, like almost like a ram's horn design on the back of his shoulders or on the front. And it's just, but it's like massive, like solid black caps all the way up. And it's like, that's intense, bro.
Oh, there's this dude. I think his name on like Instagram is Ephemeral Remy. He's working on like his third bodysuit, I think. And he had everything head to toe blacked out, not his face, but like everything blacked out. And he's been going back over it with the reds and whites and everything. And he just posted something the other day. He had like a 10th session on his armpit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got one dot in mine, and
dude,
I about cried.
This like just peaks up. Like there's these, I got this like kind of traditional Japanese or Chinese Japanese dragon. And then this the flames come up into the armpit a little bit, and that, like when he had to keep going over that because he was feathering in the color, because it's like, okay, yellow and then a little bit of orange and then some green in it, and it was just like, okay, stop, dude, I feel like you're ripping my arm off. Like everything else was fine, and then right up in there it's just like, why are you stabbing my heart? Like what is happening right now? It's so crazy how the nerves change in different locations like that. And
oh man,
so what
every single time, yeah.
Man. Okay, so getting a little lighter on some of those comments. So I want to shift to the subject of your TikToks. At least the majority of the ones I see, they're all about your church sign. You got one of those fun church signs where you put in the letters and everything, and some genius put you in charge of that. So I really enjoyed just the whole process of I like the way you film them and everything, and then the funny sayings that you throw up there. The one I saw most recently, I love the fake out because you like doing the whole thing, and then you like kind of pan it real quick, and it's like trust Jesus, and you're like, there's a good start, and then you're like standing in front of it, like nodding, you walk out of the way, and it reveals trust Jesus, not farts, because never trust a fart. That's good wisdom.
Exactly.
There. And so
motto of my life.
How do they let you leave those ridiculous sayings up, or are you just putting those up for TikTok? Like, let us know, how's that?
So this is going to be one of those like secret revealed moments. I'm pretty sure my pastor doesn't even know about these.
It's okay.
If he
He'll
does,
never
he
listen
hasn't
to this
said
podcast
anything.
either, so it'll be fun.
All right, cool. Whew. But I've even had people that like have commented on my videos, and they're like, "Hey, is Jason still the pastor out there?" And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, "We used to work with him. We love him." And I'm like, "Okay, don't tell him." But it's pretty much, I know my youth see them because they all follow me on TikTok, and they'll come up after like during the service or whatever, and they're like, "Saw that one, it wasn't your best." And I'm like, "Okay, thanks." But I've had a couple that have stayed up all week that weren't like the very over the, like I think the one I did where it was like sin, drop it like it's hot, and then I ended up twerking at the end of the video, or attempting to at least. Yeah. That one, that sign stayed up all week. But I normally they'll stay up for maybe 5 minutes. I'll do the video, and then I'll immediately go and take them down for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to get fired. Two, we right across the street is a couple that goes to church with us, and they've known me since I was in like 5th grade, and they are very much not afraid to beat me over the head with a stick if I need it. Nice. So I don't want them getting onto me. But the last reason is I'll actually switch it out with something that is either like a verse that means a lot to me, like going back to that Matthew 11:28, throwing that up there, or throwing up something as simple as saying like "you are loved," or like Jesus loves you. Just something simple that people, whether they do this or not, I don't know, but I get comments all the time saying things like, they're going to drive by, or like they live near there, they're going to drive by and see the sign and check it out, and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, when they drive by, yeah, it would be hilarious to see all the pictures flooding like Instagram and all these other places of the church sign, people taking pictures with it and all this, and maybe we would get visitors because of it or something. I really don't know, but having people drive by just to see like this funny sign, and then seeing something that shares the gospel with them, or causes them to break open their Bible and see like, well, what does that verse say? Right. Break it open, and they're like, oh wow, that's interesting. You know, to be able to do something like that, I think was not originally the main goal. Originally the main goal was just kind of make my first video and that be it. I wasn't planning on making it some sort of series or whatever, but
it's kind of become
people kept saying like, make it a series. Yeah, so it's kind of become my weekly thing. And before this, man, I had been put in charge of the sign like 2 years ago, and I changed it maybe 3 times in that 2 years, and other people had to like break into my office and steal the letters so that they could go and change the sign, because I'm like, well, okay, the Easter sign is still good for Christmas, I guess. And because I got lazy, so this has kind of gotten me into a more constant thing, like a weekly thing where I go and I change the sign and we do something new every single week. So it's kind of been all
awesome. Right. That's fun, man. So which one out of all the videos, or, maybe one that didn't make the video, but what's been your favorite? What do you think was like, this was the peak? I don't know if I could hit that again. Which one are you most proud of?
I really don't. Oh, which one am I most proud of? None of them. No. I would probably, I still really like my first one, man. It was the God Made Farts Funny. I still really like that one. The original idea video that I had posted I was like, they put me in charge of the sign. Haha, I can make it say something like, ever wonder if Jesus farted? Come in Sunday to find out. And then when they get there, the pastor doesn't talk about that at all. And that's, it. So I think like if I were to be able to put something like that on the sign and leave it, that would be hilarious, and that would probably be my super peak moment. But farts
are funny, so that's good.
That and they are. And I don't care what anybody says, they are hilarious. But yeah, I think probably the first one I made was probably my favorite. I've had a couple more that I've written down. I even ran them by my youth. I'm like, what do you guys think of these? And I read off my whole list. They didn't have a single one that they even cracked a smile at. They were all just like, and I'm like, okay, I guess we're back to the drawing board. So
that's one thing, man. Hanging out with youth definitely keeps you on your toes, and they don't hold. That was one thing I loved about working with youth is the combo of like, man. Like if you do something that's actually cool, they will let you know, and they will be like, hey, that was actually cool, and they will mean it. They won't just give you like, oh, that was nice. Like they're not into that. They don't. There's too much concern about clout and everything. Like they're not just going to give you the like, thanks, but they will absolutely let you know if you're being lame or whatever. But at the same time, man, the thing. The thing I love on the spiritual side of things is that like there's so many less filters, and like I think that's some of what I know Jesus when he says you got to come with faith like a child. I mean, he's talking about like a little kid who just like runs up through the crowd with no concern for everything else that's happening, no decorum or anything else, just like, I'm going to this guy because he's I can tell this is special. And I love that youth approach life in that way too. It's just like, you just get where they're at, and you can tell they're not usually putting on a ton of a front. You can get pretty real with them if you're willing to be real. Otherwise you get just the jaded, like, yeah, whatever, but that was always still exactly one of my favorite things about youth. And now that I've got 2 middle schoolers, so it's crazy watching them grow into all that sass and everything else, but like the depth at which they really get things, and the way that they'll even like I'm always concerned about like, what are you guys watching? Like what the heck is this show? And just so you know, like that's not okay, and they're like, oh, I know, Dad. And they will turn around and tell me like, and she shouldn't be doing that because Jesus would not like that. And she shouldn't be doing this. And like, that's not how you treat people. And and I'm like, yeah, all right. I don't know why I spoke up. Like, you should preach that.
You got this. You got it.
For real. All right. So, we've been chatting for a minute and we should probably stop at some point. So, this podcast will be an hour and a half long, easy. So what, to wrap things up, whether it's somebody sitting in your, laying on the bench or sitting in the chair or whatever, getting tattooed, somebody you run into on the street, somebody walks into the church, whatever it is, what would you say to somebody who's wondering, why should I consider following Jesus? Cause like I was talking about this, I preached on Sunday, out of Luke 14 and, counting the cost and recognizing like Jesus, looks at the crowd following him and he's like, man, if you're not going to like despise your family and take up a cross to follow me, you can't be my disciple. And yet a bunch of people for millennia now have been following Jesus because it's worth it. So what do you say is so radically different and radically awesome about Christ, that he is worth following?
So when you had sent me kind of that question and I was like, how can I wanted to like think about this big, deep theological answer. And like, I wanted to give probably like this big inspiration where you do like this big zoom in on me and it's like just this big moving moment. We have violins play, but
cinematic music behind. Yeah,
exactly. But I couldn't come up with an answer like that. The only thing I could come up with is really the truth of it. And for me, it's the fact that I would tell somebody like, if they say, what, why should I consider following Jesus? What makes that different? Like, obviously you're a tattoo artist. You're kind of like, you're not, I've heard all my life, people are supposed to be separate as Christians. You're separate from the world. You're not supposed to be like the world. And I'm like, just because you dress the same way as everybody else, just because you have like, trendy clothing, just because you are something like a tattoo artist, that doesn't mean anything. Right. When God changes you and when Jesus really has an impact on your life, those aren't the things that change. The things that change is the way that you speak to people, the way that you speak with people, the heart that you have for people, and of course the way that you handle situations. I think probably the most rad thing about living for Jesus, for someone that doesn't already, if they just decided today to turn their life over to him and follow him, I think the most rad thing they would find would be ultimately his grace that changes you in such a way that you can't explain it. You can't understand why you love people more, why you are more willing to be there for people, why you are happier, why you are simply more, I guess the way that everybody can describe it is more joyful. It's a feeling that you can't necessarily always put into words, but it's probably the greatest feeling that I personally have ever felt and probably will ever experience in my life. So I know if people just gave Jesus the time of day, and actually one of the things I tell my youth all the time is ask questions, like get down and dirty with it. Find something in scripture and go, why is that there? What does that mean? What do we need to learn from that? Like, why do we need to hear about, this story underpants in the Bible. Like there's a story about him being told to go buy a new pair of underwear, essentially, go bury it, and then come back later and dig it up. And I press stuff like that into my youth and anybody I meet, and I'm like, find questions that you have about stuff like that. Find questions about who God is. Once you start to really search for those answers and you find those answers, that is going to be what changes your life. That's going to be where you start to notice how it's not just like, oh, I'm no longer thinking, dirty thoughts, or I'm no longer watching bad movies or listening to bad music, but it's a whole life change. Like you're gonna notice that you treat people different, that you have learned that I can love and accept people because God loved and accepted me. Yeah. And I was no different than any of those other people. So I think just the lifestyle change, the heart change, the change of everything, the gift of grace is probably the most radical thing about following Jesus to me.
Awesome. Amen. Yeah, man. He's so good. It's been super fun chatting with you, bro. And thanks for coming on here. Before we go, if people want to connect with you, where should they go to follow you? You got social media or website or anything like that? Or if they want to get a tattoo in Alabama?
Yeah, if you want to come get a tattoo in Alabama, feel free to reach out. If you're on Facebook, I've got my page, David Strickland Tattoos. It's got like a little cartoon picture of me, I think. And then my Instagram and my TikTok are both the same handle. It's just The Young Tattooist with an underscore between every word. And I think that's about all I got right now. I don't post very much on my Instagram or anything just because I'm lazy and I'm way behind on posting. But I do get on there pretty frequently and check DMs and stuff if people want to reach out to me there. But most of the time, the best place to reach me, especially for tattoos, would be my Facebook, just David Strickland Tattoos.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, hey, David, thanks for being on here. And dude, I got to say, be rad for Jesus.
Definitely. Be rad. Love it.
Okay, that's it for this week's episode of the Be Rad for Jesus podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've stuck around this long, you either hate us so bad you want to find out where to complain, or you really loved it and you want to come back for more. I want to tell you how to do that. You can go to beradforjesus.com. And we have links to everywhere you can stream and subscribe to our podcast. We have episodes, we have show notes, all on there. Or you can find us on anchor.fm or on the Anchor app. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. And if there's another platform that we don't offer yet, hit us up on the website or through Anchor and let us know where you listen to podcasts and where you would like to hear or engage with this. If you do enjoy the podcast, would you consider leaving us a review, leaving us a rating, sharing it with a friend, posting it on social media, and or even going above and beyond and supporting this podcast? You can do that on Anchor, and that would for sure help us make more episodes of this podcast, because caffeine definitely fuels just about everything we do, almost as much, but not quite as much as the Holy Spirit and our love for Jesus. That said, I hope you have a rad day. Go out and do something incredible. Be rad for Jesus, because following Jesus is radically different and radically awesome.